So this is the main interface of PolicyMap, and this is what you will see once you log in. And this map is fully interactive, so you can pan around and you can zoom in. And as you zoom, you'll see that the map will start to become more detailed. So you can even start to see some building footprints. At the top of the screen is the location search bar, and this is where you can search by things like address, city, county, state, zip, as well as some other geographies here using this drop-down menu. But if you type in a specific address, it will then drop a pin onto that location. But if you search for a different geography, like a zip code, for example, it then draws that boundary onto the map for you. The search bar only works for one geography at a time. So if I put in a second zip code, try to search for that, you'll see that it fails. But what you can do is go over to our boundaries menu at the top left. And this houses all of the different boundaries within PolicyMap. So for every single boundary that you see in here, there's some sort of data set in PolicyMap that's been aggregated to that geography. So we can add something like zip codes to the map, and then that gives us the ability to view those all at the same time. You can also click on each individual geography to see more information about it. And then going back into the boundaries menu, the first two columns on the left are primarily census-related boundaries. And we sometimes call these the building blocks of geographies. And the census doesn't publish individual information. They kind of group people into these geographies here. And the way that they're ordered is by their size as well as how many people they represent. So the smallest is a block group. So I'll add those to the map. And if we look close to Center City, Philly, you'll see that they're super tiny just because of how densely populated it is in this area. And then block groups sit inside of census tracts, so I'll add those as well. And it's kind of hard to distinguish between the two right now, but what you can do in the boundaries legend on the top left is change things such as the line weight, the line style, and you can even change the color. So now that I've done that, it kind of gives you an idea of how the block groups sit inside of census tracts. So if we take a look at this census tract here, for example, you'll see that there are 3 different block groups that sit inside of it. And then going back into the boundaries menu, one final thing to note, you might already be familiar with this, but these years here are what we call vintages. So every 10 years, the census does a major redraw of their boundaries. And so we include some older vintages in here for you to view. But sometimes you might need to make a boundary that is unique and that doesn't necessarily conform to any of the geographies I just talked about. And so for that, we have what are called custom regions. So on the top of the screen next to the location search bar here, you will find the custom regions icon, and that opens up the custom regions menu. And I'll just zoom into Aurora since you're a little bit more familiar. But this city, obviously. So once you're in here, you can view the custom regions that you've already created, as well as create a new custom region. And there are 3 different ways of doing that, and I'll just run through each one. So the first one is what we call a drawn custom region. And there are two different methods of creating drawn custom regions. The first one is a click to connect points method. So all you need to do is click onto the map to drop a point, and then just keep clicking and dropping more points until you've got the shape that you want. You get the idea. And then in the end, you're going to want to click on the first point to complete that shape. But you can also add multiple shapes to a single custom region. So let's say I wanted to add a second shape. This time I'll use the draw with pencil method. And this is just kind of a free-form way of drawing onto the map. So you just click and drag. Until you've got the shape that you want. So in this example, both of these shapes together make up a single custom region. You can then hit continue and give it a name, a description. You can change the transparency as well as the color, and then save it. One thing to note about the drawn custom regions is that they're unique and that they don't care about any of the underlying geographies unless you're trying to download data for your drawn custom region. And in that case, it's going to follow what we call a 50% coverage rule. So for example, if we wanted to download data at the census tract level, it's only going to include the census tracts that sit at least 50% inside of the custom region in the download. So if we take a look at this census tract here, for example, this one, it looks like greater than 50% sits outside of the custom region, so this wouldn't be included. However, if we look at something like this one down here, this one would be included because greater than 50% sits inside of the custom region. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're trying to download data for a drawn custom region. The next method is the assembled region, and this gives you the ability to use any of the geographies or the boundaries in PolicyMap and assemble them to make a new one. So you can select the geography from this drop-down menu. And then all you need to do is just click onto the map to select the geographies that you want to include. You can also click to deselect as well. And then again, just hit continue and then give it a name and then save it. And then the final method is the radius region. So for this one, you can either click onto the map to drop a point. Oops. And then adjust the radius accordingly. Or you can also type in a specific address in this search bar here, and it will drop the point at that location. But one thing that's great about custom regions is that you can take them to other features of PolicyMap. So if you open up a custom region that you've created, you'll see this little menu appear here. And this allows you to do a couple of things. The clip feature is something that I'll try to get to later on, but you can also view the data in a table format. You can download data, which Phil will show you, and you can also generate reports. So if you click reports, it will take you to the reports menu, and then we can create something such as a community profile report, which is basically just a demographic report that kind of gives you a snapshot of life in a given area. So at the top, you'll see a list of all the different geographies that are included that it's capturing data from in the report. And then if you scroll down, you'll find things such as population trends. You've got data on racial characteristic, age distribution. So really what's great about reports is that you can pull all this data really quickly and easily. You can also save any reports that you generate using the save icon up here, and then export it by using the print icon. And you can always go back and edit a custom region at any time by hitting this pencil icon. And a great feature is the ability to share your custom region. So if you hit the share icon, it opens up this screen. And then all you need to do is type in an email address of another user and hit send. And then it will show up in their custom regions menu. And that's great just because they don't have to go through the trouble of trying to recreate this custom region. And they can do everything with it that you can in your account. So it's a great time saver. One other thing I want to show you is the base map very quickly. So the base map is basically all the underlying details that you see on the map. So the roads, something like a lake, all the labels that you see, that's all part of the base map. And if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see this little base map settings gear. And once you're in here, you can really customize the way that your map looks. So there's 4 different base map types. There's standard, which is the default, but we also have 3 other base map types. So there's light, terrain, and satellite. And what's great is you can still overlay data on top of any of these base map types. You can also remove certain features of the map. So if we want to give our map kind of a cleaner look, we can take some of this stuff out. And then you can even add transit lines. But really, once you have the base map that you're looking for, the next step is to just start adding data onto the map. So all of the data in PolicyMap can be found up here at the top under these categories. The My Data tab, so this is where you can find data sets that were shared with you from other users. You can also find data sets that you uploaded yourself using our data loader, or data sets that our data team processed specifically for you. That would all be in here. And there are 2 different types of data in PolicyMap. There's point data, which is address level data, and layer data, which is data that's been aggregated to a geography. So all the point data can be found under the first submenu in each of these categories, starting with housing. So you'll see we have housing locations. And this little icon just indicates that it is a point data set. We have different lending locations. Under quality of life, you'll find things like food and grocery retail access and brownfields and super funds. We have some economy locations. You can view under education where schools are located. So I'll just add public schools to the map so you can see what a point data set looks like. Again, it's just address level data. So we're looking at every single public school in the area. And then you can click on each one to get more information about it. So you can view things like, student-teacher ratio, enrollment information, and even demographics. We have some health facility locations, so hospitals, things like drug and alcohol treatment facilities, and food access locations are in here as well. And then finally, federal housing and subsidy locations. But all of the other data is going to be the layer data, which I mentioned. So there's really just a ton of different layer data sets in here. So if we look under demographics, you'll find things that, of course, relate to demographics, population, race, ethnicity. One data set that we updated pretty recently is the diversity index. So this is just the probability that two individuals chosen at random would be of different races or ethnicities. So basically the darker areas show higher diversity, whereas kind of the lighter areas show less. And you'll notice that you can add both point data sets and layer data sets to the map at the same time, which is cool. Another thing you'll notice is that some of these data sets get very specific. So if we look at median household income, it really breaks it out by, you can look at it by race, as well as by housing tenure. So I definitely recommend just going through each of these categories and kind of taking the time to explore and see what we have, because there's just so much in here. But if you're looking for something specific, you can always type in a keyword up here. So if you type in something like, I don't know, cancer, for example, it will pull up every single data set that relates to that keyword. If you look at, in the top right corner, you'll see a link to our data directory, which is really useful because it kind of gives you a broad summary of what you'll see in each of these categories. So under demographics, you'll see total population, which is one of our data sets, and then you can look at which geographies are available for that data set, as well as the years that are available. And then if you click on the source, that will take you to our data dictionary. And this kind of gives you more information about the source and how the data was processed. And we always provide a ton of description down below. So a lot of our users really like how detailed we get. And then as for customizing data in PolicyMap, so really the best way to do that, or the most unique way, is through the legend on the left side of the screen. So if we open up a data set, so we'll look at median household income. The layer legend is over here on the left side of the screen. And you can, at the top, see the title. So it shows we're looking at estimated median income of a household between 2016 and 2020. If you click on the I, it will pull up a description of that data set. The source just takes you back to the data dictionary. And then you're able to change the year. So for this data set, you'll see that we have different years that are available. So we can go back in time and view the data from year 2000. And you'll notice that the title updates to show 2000, as well as the shade by, just because these geographies were drawn differently back in year 2000. You can also change the variables. So for this data set, you'll see that percent change is available. But depending on the data set, there's going to be different variables and different years that are available. You can change the shade by as well. So that's the geography that's being shown, as well as the vintage. So right now we're looking at the data at the census tract level, but we can switch it to block group. And one thing to note is that the shade by will automatically update based on your zoom level. So if we zoom in, it'll show block group, but if we zoom out, you'll see that now it shows census tract. And if you keep zooming, it should update to zip code. But you are able to lock in a specific shade by hitting the lock icon. And then as you zoom in and out, it will keep it at this shade by. If we look under ranges, you'll notice that the ranges are always in quintiles as the default. So what it's doing is it's taking the total number of geographies and laying them out in a horizontal form or a histogram based on where the data is occurring. And the default's always at a national level. So what that means is that for this data set, 1/5 of the data sits between 92,376 and 250,000. One fifth of the data is in here, and then so on and so forth. But what you can do is go in and adjust these cut points. So that instead of having what seems like a random cut points, you can make it so it's a little bit easier to understand what you're looking at. And then Phil will show you the map extent. But right now, since we're looking at US data, that just means that the default for the ranges is always going to be at the national level. And then finally, if you look under colors, you can change the color. And it also gives you the option to invert the color. So right now, the dark areas show high income areas. But if we invert, and I might need to just adjust the ranges a little bit, but the darker areas now show the lower income areas. And then for the point data sets, again, the legend will appear on the left side of the screen. You can change the icons. But really most of the customization is done using the filters. So you can filter by, for this data set, facility type. So we can look at just children's hospitals, critical access hospitals, and then you can also filter across different categories here. I might need to just adjust some of these filters so we're covering more hospitals. And you can also add multiple point data sets to the map at the same time. So we could also add public schools. And then again, using the filters, we can kind of whittle down these points and get very specific. So we could look at just middle schools and high schools. And then we could take it a step further and say we want to look at middle schools and high schools with 650 students or more. So yeah, those are really all of the basic features that I wanted to show you guys. So I'll turn it over to Phil to cover some of the more advanced features.
Got a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For the My Data, if we're uploading data, sort of what format do we need to, or can we upload that in, whether it's for point data or otherwise?
So our data loader is just for point data. But if you have something like a shapefile, or if you want to upload layer data to the tool, that would have to be done through our data services team. So once they upload that, it would then show up in the My Data tab.
But
Okay.
yeah, if you have address level data, you can upload it using the data loader. I'll try to show you a little bit of that.
And I guess one other question, some of the data sources were PolicyMap as the source. Do those also have a methodology or even a basic sort of methodology in the data dictionary?
Most of them have a very basic methodology. We probably won't go into the details. Mainly some of it is a bit of the secret sauce of the PolicyMap data work. But you should be able to get the gist of what we use to process that data, produce it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, let me pull up my screen and we'll do if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them too. So that way we're not just talking a bit about PolicyMap. If you saw from Aaron's session, it's really good because it's going to give you a good sense of some of the basics you can do. The ability to customize data in the legend is probably one of the main features that we really focused on when we built PolicyMap. Just because you can go and look at data, visualize data, one thing, but be able to control it and customize it from colors to ranges and such really changes how you're able to use data within the tool. So a couple things I'll show you in today's session then for me is some of the other ways you can manage data and customize it. So again, we go to Aurora again real quick. Probably one of my favorite features is something that we've been wanting to do within the tool for the longest time, and that's the ability to look at data locally. So what Aaron showed you in the case of something like the diversity index, if you pulled this up, what you'll see is initially the result is at the national level, which means that the ranges, the quintiles you're looking at, is reflective of the entire country. But sometimes being able to see that locally really changes how the data looks like. So the extent function now takes the ranges from just within the map extent that we're looking at here compared to the nation. So you can really see how it changes that scale on the west side versus the east side in its coverage. So the map extent is neat because initially it defaults by your extent of the map. But in this case, if you wanted to just show it for the city, you can then use what we call the clip feature. And what this will do is if you open this little window up, you can clip the data to just, I get to show you one of our multi-indicator bubbles, to just the area that we search for, which is in this case the city of Aurora. What's the county you guys in? I think it's easier to show the county.
We're in a couple counties, but Arapahoe or Adams are the two main ones.
Pull this up real quick. Oh, I see what you're talking about. All right. That's quite a cutout there. So in this case, we'll clip just for this county. Wow. So what this does is that instead of doing the map extent for the window itself, it's clipping just the county or the city, or if you create if you could create a custom region of multiple counties, it'll clip just for those sets. So the benefit of this is that you're getting data, you're visualizing the data for the area that you're actually trying to present for the area itself. So yeah, Aurora gets cut off a little bit, huh? Wow. Let's go back to Aurora real quick. Let's see if we can do this. So the clip is a very unique function, as you can see, because what it's going to do is instead of just seeing everything as one solid color for the diversity index, it does really give you a chance to see how it looks locally data-wise. And so the extent can be reflective for every indicator in the tool. If you're looking at something like income information, you probably know your income areas, but if you pull this up and look at income based on the extent of the city, then you can start seeing how it differs from the national numbers a little bit as well. So the map extend is really neat. The clip feature is neat as well because what it's doing here is that it's simplifying the data to just the containment area that you're looking at. So meaning that if you were to put something like PPP loan data on the map, it'll only show the loan data just for Aurora, as well as boundaries. So that way, if you're looking at how maybe tracks look like in the city, it'll just clip data for just the boundaries within the city as well. And then all this ties into the way that you can actually download data in PolicyMap. So there's two unique ways to download data. There is the download icon itself, which is up here. This is a little bit of a different function. The goal of the download icon is to go in and just download data. There's really no map interaction with it. So with this, you would search for data you add, be it points or layers. You can search for the geography just like you would in the maps. The difference is on the maps page, you're probably most likely working with data, and now you want to get this data outside of the tool. So to do that, you're going to use the same little icon on the very top there, but instead of clip, we're going to use the download function. And what this does is opens up what we call the sidebar. And basically it works in conjunction with the data on the map. So right now we're looking at the percentage of people without the median household income. And from this, we can choose in the legend whatever year we want. So if you wanted to download data at a past tense, you can download that and it'll change it to the 2000 download, as well as the variable, of course. And then the geographies. So that way, if you're looking to download data for zip codes within the city, you're changing that, it'll download zip codes instead. This also ties with points. So if we were to download point data sets, let's say we do want to download PPP loans in the city, adding points to the map will then give us the ability to download points. But if you use the filters with points, you can also then whittle down those points you're trying to download. So if you're looking for just women-owned businesses that applied for the PPP loans, this allows you to simplify that list, and now you're just going to get a list of women-owned businesses that applied for the PPP loan in your download. And then the last feature, which is probably my favorite feature in the download, is the ability to join those two things together. So if we wanted to find out of these women-owned businesses that applied for the PPP loans, maybe how many of them sit within in a track that is qualified for new markets and opportunity zones at the same time. So what we do is we add those 2 points of data on the map, which is the PPP loans that we filtered, and then add a layer data, which is for us new markets and opportunity zones qualifications. So in the sidebar, you can still download, if you wanted to, all the tracks in Aurora that are yes or no of the eligibility for these programs. You can still download the PPP loans directly. And then, of course, the last one is my favorite, is the ability to join these two things together. And so with this download, what you would get is a list of, do it for the direct download. What you'll get is a list of, first, every women-owned business that applied for PPP loans, the census tract that each business sits in, and then the eligibility of those tracks based on the criteria. So this is a really neat way to basically create a new data set by joining a point or address level data set to a geography and getting data for those geographies. And this can all tie back to the data loader. If you upload a spreadsheet of addresses, maybe a portfolio or investment sites or sites across the city that you're working on, you can join data to those addresses. And it doesn't have to be a federal program. It can be things like income, racial characteristics, access to transportation, computers, or even health indicators. So each one of those things, you can take the address, stamp it to a geography, and download data for those geographies in that process. The other thing that's really neat about the download in the sidebar is, as you can see with the filters for points, you can filter which points you're trying to download. But if you were to choose something like layer data, you can also choose to download individual ranges within the layer. So if you're looking for just tracks that have income over 100,000, selecting that will give you only a list of tracks within the city that have income over 100,000. So the filters in the legend, again, tie to not only what you view, but also what you download in that process. So this is my really cool file. And then what we get is from J on, this is all of the PPP loan data. It's a lot of data from the PPP loan. So those are all the loans that are women-owned businesses in Aurora. And then on the other side of that line are the track that it sits in, the state, the GID is the track itself, and then of course the eligibility for each one of those tracks. All right, and then just the one quick thing about the data loader, I won't really show you how to do it because it's a very straightforward tool. If you go in here, it'll walk you through the steps. The only thing that we do talk about in the case of the data loader is that it is an address-based data loading tool for now. So the very minimum you need from your file is the address, city, state, and zip. Everything else is up to you. It could be as dynamic as you want by having things like names and dates and links and such, or it can be simple and just have the address, city, state, and zip, and maybe an identifier for the geographies. But once it's loaded into PolicyMap, you can then use it alongside all the other features that Aaron and I just talked about. So again, if you do create it, it'll be here. And then once it's here, you can join it using the data loader or just use it alongside other data to visualize in that same instance.
Now, when one of our folks uploads some data into there, is that available just to that user? Is it available to the whole City of Aurora team? And is it, I'm presuming it's only can possibly be available to our team, not to others outside of the organization?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So when you upload the data set, you have the option here to choose how you want to share it. By default, it's going to be just the user, so myself only, meaning only that person has access to it. But then we do want to give you options, so you can either select individuals, adding each person from the city in here that has access to it, or there's even the option to make it public. So we do have users that upload point data sets. Maybe it's a listing of sites that they want people to access. The publicly shareable allows them to upload it into PolicyMap and then use the share features to put it out there. But by default, yeah, nobody else has access to it except for the original uploader. All right, and then the last thing I'll talk about is just the ability to do a little bit of spatial analytics within the tool. What that means is that by default, if you look on the right hand side here, the system is what we call a single layer map, meaning that if you add a very simple layer like uninsured population, the default layer is going to change that, is going to show you multiple colors, and each color represents, in this case, census tracts that have anything in the dark color is 13% or more, anything in the light color is 3% or less of the persons here that do not have health insurance. And if we wanted to find out, maybe is there a correlation or causation sometimes based on income or even access to certain needs and such. So if we were to put something like income on the map, of course, it's going to flip the map, so you don't really have the ability to see how those two layers intersect with each other. You can always make a series of maps to show that, but then we wanted to be able to give users that ability to make some of those really neat maps, and that's the multi-layer tool. And so what this does is it shows you one color. So instead of multiple colors, it's going to show you one, and that one color then is up to you to determine what's being shown in the map. So in the case of income, it starts at 2,500, maxed at 250,000. You can see the histogram telling you that this is the peak of where income occurs, but we can just type in the number we wanted to left and right, or slide, or use the slider themselves. So in this case, we can put in something like 48,000, which is the national income for a family of 4 in poverty. So what we get is any place in purple are census tracts that have no more than 48,000 in median household income. And we can adjust this number as much as we want, as you can see. And then from this, we can add the next layer, and that is, we'll do uninsured population. So the next layer that occurs is uninsured population. It represents 0 to 100%, which is its full amount. But you can see on the map, though, we're still tied to the first layer, which is no more than 50,000 household income. And so from this, we can enter a number and say, well, let's find places that have at least 10% of the population uninsured. So it removed a few tracks. So we can bring this up a little bit and see how we do. Wow. All right. So now what we get are only census tracts that meet both criteria of no more than 50,000 household income and at least 20% of the persons here do not have health insurance. And then from this, we can add another layer and say something like how many people maybe do not have access to a computer. Just as an, if you're trying to reach out to these persons, maybe sending them emails probably won't work as much. And again, in this case, access to a computer is still at 100%, but the map is still contained within the two first layers. So let's look at something like 20% of the persons. Ooh, that wipes it out. So there we go. So what we get here is a map that shows only census tracts that meet all three criteria. And then we can still adjust these numbers until we get that right range. And the initial goal of the multi-layer maps is a bit of a site selection type tool, giving you a chance to identify places you're trying to work with and using data to identify those places. And the initial query of the multi-layer maps is what we call an AND function, which is places that meet, in this case, income and uninsured population and computer access. But sometimes if you click around the map a little bit, you can still see information. You can still see some of the reasons why those places did not meet the criteria of all three. And a lot of times you get a little more information about the surrounding neighborhoods that you're missing. And so we wanted to change the ability to query from the AND function to an OR function. So instead of the intersection of these layers, you're going to see the overlap. And what you'll get from this map is sometimes a pretty cool map. Still rendering. So you still have the ability to see where all three criteria meet, but now you have the ability to see where two criteria meet, or one, or even sometimes none. So the OR feature is really neat because it does give you this unique ability to really understand the surrounding neighborhoods of these places that meet the initial criteria, and it might just give you a little more information about the outside neighborhood itself. We do have the map extend feature here. It's a really cool feature because what this does is that it locks the extent values that you set up. So I didn't really set it up initially, but once I do that here, you can see that the income range for the area here is actually on the far side of it, but it locks the extent in at the same time. And of course, it resets it all on me. So yeah, so those are the main things I really wanted to cover in the other side of that session. Is there any questions we can answer while you're here?
Just sort of a different topic. If we come up with a very clever map and want to put it into a document, what sort of graphic export options do we have, and kind of what resolution, and I presume y'all have some sort of citation that you request.
Yep. Yeah. So a bunch of those things are a little bit of in production, but in the case of the print export, you can use the print icon for any of our maps that you do. So be it the multi-layers or the single layer maps. So the maps that you do export have a little bit of options. You can edit the title. You can move the legend around. Whoops. All right, maybe not that one. Hold on. You can move the legend around, change the orientation of the map, export, and so forth. So have a little bit of customization of those maps once you create them. There is a citation link in the very top. This is actually being updated now, but for now, this takes you to a different place, which is not really what I want to do. The citation will be eventually, it'll just pop up and give you the text that it's going to copy exactly what you just created here. in that process. Otherwise, you can download the data, and then of course the download file has the metadata as well as the data description and directory, so you have a bit of information to cite while you're using it. Yep. Any other questions we can help answer? All right. Well, if you well, Aaron's gonna follow up with an email that'll have the session recorded. There is a lot of support pages that we'll share in that link as well. I didn't cover it in my session, but in the very top of the map, you'll see there's a support link, but Aaron can send that to our help page. It's a lot of guides. Everything we covered in today's session is in those guides that you can interact with, but the main thing is you can always email us at any time as you go through the tool. If you have questions about data, features, or you want to see something that you're trying to do that you just can't process, we're happy to jump on a call or even answer those questions.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.